Hello and welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast, episode 16. I'm Danny and I'm here with Randy.
What's up, Danny?
Hey, Randy. And today we're going to talk about how to develop patience the Stoics way.
Oh, the Stoics way?
The Stoics way. It's like our namesake.
Right on.
I think that's what they call it, right?
Yeah, patience. That's a bitch, huh?
Patience is a bitch. Patience is a difficult thing, I think, for all of us, especially in the modern age. I don't know if it was easier in the past. I can speculate.
I would say yes, but everything looks better in the rearview mirror.
It does, doesn't it? It's hindsight. I feel like things, I feel like in the past, things just took longer and there was an expectation that they would take longer. Like, I think back even to when we were in college and going to the library to look up information, right? It wasn't at your fingertip.
Dude, it was the Dewey Decimal System in the card catalog.
Yeah, you had to use that, right?
Yeah.
So even doing that took time, or microfiche, right? You're scrolling through these articles, like, took time. You couldn't just immediately search for something and get results.
Or in the beginning of the internet, when you ordered something online and it took 2 to 4 weeks to get to you.
Yeah.
Now we have instant gratification with Amazon. We get stuff overnight or the same day.
It's insane. I was laughing about this just the other day. I ordered a new webcam at 8:30 at night, and it was on my doorstep before 9 a.m. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's like almost 12 hours. It was a ridiculous amount of time.
Yeah, but that's no excuse.
No
excuse, because even though we're used to instant gratification, we can all develop patience. Patience is it a virtue?
Patience is a virtue.
Patience is a virtue. So virtues can be developed, they can be learned, they can be taught.
We can be virtuous.
And it's our goal in this episode to help teach it, or at least investigate it, because we're both struggling with patience. What's something you're struggling with patience right now?
With patience? I mean, everything. No. I think one of the biggest things I struggle with patience on a regular basis is, I have ideas. I have a lot of ideas for projects. Starting them and getting them done, and the point of time between when I start and when I finish, I have a tendency to get impatient sometimes. Not always, but I do sometimes with the progress that I'm making. I often expect very quick progress from myself, and when I feel like the progress is slowed, I get very upset and frustrated sometimes.
Yeah, it sounds very, very difficult. I mean, that's how you have to develop patience. For me, it's something similar. I find most recently I'm having difficulty with patience when I'm actually at work. And, we have a schedule where clients come in every 15 minutes or so. And it would be nice if that schedule was kind of followed. But, people show up a half an hour late, an hour late. They'll show up a half an hour early. And so I am having difficulty developing patience around just accepting people coming to the office when they come.
Clients being late, yeah.
Because what ends up happening is I get to work on time, and nobody shows up for like the first hour. And then they all start showing up late, and they start showing up early, so it just gets completely bottlenecked. And then when it's time for me to have my lunch, everybody's there.
And you can't have
a lunch. So like I've been dealing with impatience around that area. So today's episode, we can actually investigate how to develop patience, because we're both impatient.
Yeah, everybody is, I think.
Everybody is. But, in the same hand, it's kind of like the yin and the yang. Everybody's on a spectrum of patience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can always look back at times in your life where you have been more patient.
I think actually that's a great point, too. Thinking of it in terms of a spectrum or a matter of degree, I think a lot of times when we talk about virtue, we also struggle with this because we have the idea of being virtuous, right? Like being patient or being wise or being temperate, right? And we forget often, I think, that a lot of times we all fall on some line in that degree, right? In that scale. So we're probably not all the way at the bottom. We're somewhere in the middle. And getting to that virtue is a matter of just putting in a little effort, I think, to get there. That we're usually not, totally way off. And it's a matter of a lifelong practice, too. I think that's the other important thing. Virtues take time. It's not immediate. You need patience to be patient, right?
No!
No! Foiled at the outset. Oh, God.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So how would you define, or I guess in your mind, how would you define patience?
I love the word endurance.
Endurance is a good word.
Yeah. The power to endure. To hold on in spite of anything. Like, I just imagine when somebody says patience or endurance, I imagine like a person just standing there and enduring the elements, like the rain pounding down on them, and they're just standing there. And like, basically, if you just stand there and you endure and you suffer whatever you have to suffer, but you continue to stand there no matter what, you will endure through it. And the thing is, you can get through everything.
You can, yeah. You absolutely can.
Yeah. Like, if you're here, if you're listening to this podcast, you've gotten through everything already.
Yeah.
Every obstacle that came up against you in your life, you've gotten through it. And that's proof that you can continue to get through every obstacle that comes to meet you.
I like that. I like two things you said. Yeah, because endurance is I think that's a great way to think of patience, because it is about enduring. It's about, dealing with something we might not want to deal with. Time, waiting, dealing with the process of becoming better at something, right? That long process of being bad in the beginning. Being patient with ourselves, being patient with the world. A lot of it is just endurance. It's just being willing to just stand there and wait it out, right? And do what you need to do to wait it out and put the effort in. I think that's important. So that's really good. There was another thing, and I can't remember now what it was.
Okay, well, let me talk about something else that I just want to bring up.
Okay, bring it up.
I've been having this great time reading books by Martin Seligman. He wrote Learned Optimism. He also wrote Flourish and some other books. He's worked in the whole positive psychology field at University of Pennsylvania for like 40 years. And he was giving an example.
So he's an expert.
I mean, you could say. So he gives an example in his book Flourish, how basically, like, if we take a look at, like, pilots in the military or snipers and their training, all right, they basically, for a sniper, for instance, it can sometimes take up to 24 hours for them to get in their position where they're ready to shoot, and then it can take another 36 hours for
they're
them
just
to be,
sitting there. Yeah,
until they actually take the shot. So, like, he looks at it like, how would a psychologist actually approach this? Well, they would probably give them some drugs to help them stay awake, like Provigil or amphetamine salts, something like that,
to keep them up and alert.
And then he would give them some techniques like putting a rubber band around your wrist to snap whenever you're tired and stuff like that. But that's not how the military does it. The military does it by making them actually endure through more difficult challenges and just being like, you're going to have to suffer, but you have to learn how to actually endure the suffering and still perform.
Yeah, that was the other thing too, what you said too, right? We've already endured through so much. That was the other point, yeah. And I think it's true, right? When we look back in our lives, we've gotten through all this stuff up till now. So we can do it. And that's a great example, what the military does, because if you can endure something longer, you can endure the shorter thing. And once you learn that, I think once we actually acknowledge it, we are very powerful in terms of what we can overcome. And I think a lot of times it's really just about reminding ourselves. For me, especially like with patience, I know a lot of times it's really identifying when I'm being impatient as soon as possible, acknowledging it. Sometimes it requires like taking a break from something, but it's acknowledging what's bothering me so I don't just let myself get sort of overwhelmed and sort of my imagination run wild, right, with the frustrations and the annoyances.
Oh, totally, 100%. There's another thing that I like that is just, number one, having the mindset, the belief that you can get through it. Because oftentimes we defeat ourselves by thinking this is going to cripple us.
Yeah.
Whereas if we have the mindset that we can get through this, and then making it easier on ourselves by just looking at today. Like in my most difficult, trying times, I've looked at it like, can I just get through today? Can I survive today? And then tomorrow I'll worry about tomorrow. But a lot of the difficulty with these things we have to endure is we look and we project the whole time that we have to endure it.
Yeah, we project out into the future way too far, and then our imagination runs wild. And it's funny, like, that is a good practice where basically, when we're trying to endure something, we tend to look way too far down the line. We look at the whole project. I think back to like final papers, right? And being like, oh, I got to write this paper I don't really want to write. And I look at the whole thing, like 15 or 20 pages. I don't want to write all that. But really, when I break it down to, okay, I'm just going to get something done today. I just got to get through this next 5 hours. Then it's manageable and it's much easier to endure. And you don't let your imagination run wild. Our attitude about life in general, our imagination, I think those are two of the biggest things that can be in our favor or can be against us, right? And we've talked about that before. Positive attitude is something that if we can cultivate and develop it, will help us get through literally any obstacle we face and will help us have energy to deal with life, right? And, I think also our imagination, we tend to turn things into something way worse than they are. Always. I mean, at least that's been my experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. So what would you say your definition of patience is?
Okay, I really like endurance, I do. I think also, too, the golden mean for Aristotle, right? That idea of finding...
I love this that you're talking
about.
Yeah,
right? The idea of the golden mean is the middle, right? It's the in-between two extreme states. And I think the nice thing that Aristotle mentions is that for each of us, this is different. Because we all have slightly different tendencies, different dispositions from the outset. Some of us might be more inclined to be, rash or, rush through things. Some of us might be more, find patience very difficult. Some might find it a bit easier. So it's first, I think, identifying kind of what your strengths and weaknesses are, where you sort of fall on that line, and recognizing that you are trying to stay away from the extremes. And I think just realizing that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, like I really like when you talk about this, how you talk about the virtues and there being a virtue and a vice, kind of like two sides of it. So for instance, for patience, it could be like impatience is one side of it, and then just complacency, total acceptance of whatever would be the other side.
Yeah.
And you actually have to try and find the mean and find patience.
The virtue is sandwiched, right, between two extreme states. And I always love that idea because it's true, right? When you talk about character, anything with our character, there is always an extreme representation of it on either side, and we need to get to that middle because the middle is where self-control is. The middle is where we are exercising our reason, we're exercising our ability to control ourselves and to endure what's presented to us, right, in the world, to endure, what we need to endure. And I think it's a great way to think about, ourselves and our character in general. Yeah. It makes it easier to understand.
Yeah. So, let's see. So now we've defined patience. And
I think if we're talking about this from a Stoic perspective, it's important to mention, that Stoicism comes from that classical standpoint, right? Where we are rational creatures. And I think, Aristotle said, right, that, human beings are rational political animals, meaning we are rational on the one hand. That's the unique function that makes us unique from everything else in the world, right? That we have these higher cognitive faculties, we have imagination, we have reason, right? We have all these things. But we're also social creatures, and that's the other side of that, right? That's the political side. So understanding our rationality and the role reason plays in our character development and in our lives. And we see this a lot in Stoicism. I mean, even, if you look at like popular Stoicism now, the idea that we can sort of use our rational capacity to sort of endure our emotions, overcome them, right? We can kind of overcome anything in the world through our attitude and our mindset. That's the idea of taking reason, right? And using reason to sort of control who we are and to become free in our control, I think. There's a sort of connection between the two.
Mm-hmm. Is there a social aspect to patience? Like, would that be something like looking at people who have been more patient than you, like looking at people who have dealt with severe adversity and overcome it, and just say, hey, I'm a person like they're a person, and I can get through that? That's a
good point, right? I think for me, at least personally, I think that's always part of it, right? Is we can look at the world and identify with other human beings, right? The human experience is unique, but it's also common. And it's unique in the sense that it is our own experience, but it's also common in the sense that everybody's been through it, right? Mm-hmm. And if there's something we're going through, there's somebody else has gone through something similar. Yep. And we can look at those extreme cases of people being patient, enduring through difficulties, and we can say, look, they are a person too. I can get through this if they can, right? I can do anything another person can do, ultimately. It just takes time and it takes practice. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a crucial thing, looking at our world outside of us. I mean, for Aristotle, it was also having good friends and using them as another self to get a better understanding of our own character and also learning through our relationships, right? So I think that social aspect plays a big role in it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, yeah.
So let's talk about, because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are struggling with patience. They maybe consider themselves impatient, or they may not even realize they have an issue with patience right now. They're just frustrated and angry and pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of the things right now in the modern world that are sources of impatience, or maybe things that kind of feed into it, right?
Example right here, when you order something on Amazon, it says it's coming tomorrow, and then it doesn't show up for 2 days. Like, whoa.
Yeah, right? God damn, they lied to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the everyday things we have to deal with impatience. Standing in lines, waiting in traffic, having to go to school or do applications, or waiting for a promotion.
Yeah, waiting for any kind of response from someone. It's interesting. I think a lot of things that we used to do in the past, like food preparation and stuff, we don't do anymore. We order out, right? We do things like that. And so we get impatient waiting for it to come. We almost expect, because, it's funny, I think, with the internet, I mean, we've really seen, right, this dramatic change in our expectations for when things should happen. And we constantly talk about that, when we talk about like Wi-Fi, with speed of cell phones, like with 5G and stuff, we're always talking about increasing speed, increasing our expectations for immediacy. And like, I think that sort of changes the way we look at everything else in the world in a very problematic way.
Yeah, I mean, just the example you gave of food preparation. Like, I noticed this so much with my parents, where they're so involved in preparing what they're going to eat later that day and later that week, like knowing the exact things they're going to eat. And for me, food is an afterthought. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter. If I don't get this, I'll get something else. Like, it's easy. And so because of that, we kind of lose some of the patience, because I think we lose a lot of it, maybe kind of losing the idea of a process. Like, patience is a process. Whatever you want, I'm under the firm belief that you can achieve it, but it's going to take some processing.
It's going to take a process to get to that point. It's never an immediate step from A to B, right? There's always tons of other things in between intermediaries. There might be changes. The goal might change, right? There's a lot of things you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's this processing that we don't want to deal with, because the processing can be painful and difficult, and it's a struggle.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
It doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't. I think that's fair enough, right? I think that's part of it too, right? With the endurance, is recognizing that it's not going to feel good, right? And learning to understand that, but also not see it as a negative, because I think that's the other side of this. This other side of this sort of expecting everything right now is an instant gratification. And this idea that things need to be pleasurable all the time, rather than looking at the world and seeing that the process, the pain and suffering that sometimes is involved, makes us better, improves us, and is a source of our ability to overcome who we are and realize our full set of skills and stuff, in the world.
So we could almost say that the impatience that we feel could almost be a lack of preparation. Because had we have known that it was going to be this difficult initially, it would be like, well, of course it's this difficult. I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But instead, we're not prepared, and we expect it to be somewhat different. We expect it to be easier. We expect things to be better. And then when they're not, then we're angry, we're frustrated, we're impatient.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at it, right? That if our expectations are aligned in the right way with what we're doing, we will be prepared for what we need to endure. It's funny, Nietzsche, when he talks about strength of will, he talks about the will to power. There are some philosophers who interpret that as essentially will to power is having the ability to not only sort of realize certain goals and ends, but also kind of expect the resistance and expect what you need to overcome, the power to overcome those resistances, right? Because anything we want to accomplish is going to have resistance. It's going to have obstacles. It's going to have dilemmas. It's going to have struggles, right? Even if I want to write a paper, I have to physically write the thing, right? There's going to be obstacles in the way. I might have to do additional research. I might have to change my argument. If I want to create a podcast, right, I have to actually physically do it. I have to make the recording. I have to do editing. There's always going to be obstacles and things in the way, and especially when we're new at it. And I think that's what most of us struggle with too, is anything new, we're not aware of necessarily everything that's going to be in the way. We want an immediate outcome, and it causes us to sort of derail, right?
That makes so much sense, because we look at these people who we think have the golden touch, who are successful in one thing and then they're a success in everything else. And maybe it's not so much as their character or they're lucky or something like that, but maybe they just have the expectation through experience that they're going to have to endure through difficulties. Like, the first success is going to be the most difficult, and then when you can get through that one, you say, hey, I had to endure through all this stuff, so the next time you come to something you have to endure through, you're like, hey, I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I can just endure through it, and then you get through it. And that's why someone who does have the golden touch, they can just go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing and just succeed one after another.
Well, and that's like developing the right skill set, right, for something and gaining experience with it. We always become quicker and more agile because we know what to expect. It's funny, when I first started teaching, I remember when I was getting my master's, I taught while I was getting it, and I had faculty that were helping me with that process. And one of them said to me, and I was thankful, he's like, the first time you teach a course, it's the hardest. Because you have to make everything, right? You have to create lectures, you have to create a plan, you have to create assignments, you have to do all this stuff from scratch. And it takes a lot of time. I mean, arguably the first time you teach a course, I think your pay is probably much less than later on. But once you've done it and it's under your belt, I might tweak it every semester, I might make changes, but I know the overall plan. It's there, it makes it so much smoother, I'm so much better at it, faster, right? And I can improve it over time. So I know the first time I offer the course, it's not gonna be the best iteration. I try to make it as best, the best example I can or the best course I can. But I know with time, it will get better. Because it's like anything else, right? I mean, anything else in life, what we do, when we do it often, we become better at it, faster, and we know what to expect.
Yeah, that's a great example. So for people listening, how do we develop patience? So we've kind of taken a look at what it is. How do we actually develop it? Because there are these things in our lives that are frustrating us. And it seems like there's no way out. It seems like they're never ending. And it just seems sometimes crushing or suffocating or just infuriating. It feels like you're going to explode. So how do we develop patience in these situations that vex us?
I think one thing for me is, and I've been trying to do this more often, and I find it does help, is to kind of realign my expectations with what I'm doing. And I thought, this took a lot of kind of soul searching to figure out, but I realized like my expectations were really off, both for a lot of things. And I'm not just talking about like projects and goals and personal development, but like relationships and stuff. Having the right expectation and realigning your sort of expectations so that they fit the circumstance. And I think, take for example the teaching example, right? So I know the first time I teach a course, it's going to be difficult. I'm going to have to do a lot more prep work, so I need to start planning way ahead of time. I might start actually making that course a couple months before the semester starts, because I know what to expect now. I've done it, so I know that it's going to take me time. I'm going to have to do research. I'm going to have to make sure my lectures are right, that things line up, and that I'm getting the content that I want for the students so that they develop the right skill set over time. And when I think about that with relation to other things in my life, it helps to kind of understand where I want to go, because it's almost like thinking about the goal you want to achieve, breaking it down into baby steps, right? So you know exactly what you need to hit, and trying to anticipate the obstacles as best you can. You're not always going to anticipate them correctly. You're not always going to be right. There's going to be failures and struggles. But if you do that, I think you can kind of align your expectations up better so that you aren't expecting this immediate success.
Yeah, I think that was brilliantly said. How your expectation and your goal are two separate things.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, and they need to be two separate things, because oftentimes we have this goal and that is our expectation. Like, we have a goal to make a certain income, and then our expectation is to make that income without any obstacles. But really, if you have a separate goal and expectation, so your goal is to make a certain income, your expectation is it's going to be difficult. And then I would even go further, like you were saying, to say, okay, I think it's going to be this difficult. If it was 10 times more difficult, what would that look like? And how would I overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great way to think, right? Is what obstacles, what difficulty can I anticipate? And then how can I sort of make that even higher? Even a higher hurdle to overcome, because by doing that, you're preparing yourself for the worst, right? And there's a lot of research on this. When we prepare for the worst, we succeed because we're ready for it, right? I mean, you're ready for what's to come. And I mean, it's interesting, but and we all struggle with this all the time. We have a goal in mind, and I think you're right. That's probably our biggest problem, is we think our expectation and the goal are the same thing. And they really shouldn't be, because then we think it should be immediate with no difficulty. And if we only do things that are easy for us, we never develop. I mean, Stoicism, I think, is a great philosophy in this light, where if you don't face the obstacles and the suffering in your path, you will not develop and become a better person, right? Because you're doing the same thing over and over again otherwise. Whereas when we face those challenges, when we face those obstacles, we actually are able to realize new things about ourselves. We're able to develop new skills. We're able to anticipate new things, have new experiences, and all of that really adds to our little, what's Batman's belt? Yeah, our belt, tool belt, right? With all of our toys.
It adds to our grappling hook.
Yeah, it does.
To our grappling hook.
But I mean, ultimately, I think that's super important, right? Yeah. Is figuring out what are the obstacles I need to face and how can I overcome them. And but this is a hard thing to do. I don't want to make it sound easy. Yeah. It's hard to figure out what expectations are correct.
Yeah, but it's okay. So you can. Here's the thing. It comes down to planning. like they say that no plan survives encounter with the first enemy or something like that, but also it's not the plan that's important, it's the actual act of planning. So when you have a goal, you can take a look at it and you can plan for what's the best case, what's the worst case, what's the likelihood of this happening, what's the likelihood of that happening. Now, if it was 10 times better, what would that look like? If it was 10 times worse, what would this look like? How would I deal with that? How would I deal with that? You go through all these plans, and then all of a sudden, you're so much more prepared for anything that can confront you, as opposed to somebody who's just like, oh, what the heck? My expectation is my goal.
Well, the other thing, too, is I think that's also important, right? Because when we have, I read this the other day, and I don't know who I can attribute this to, so I apologize, but it was vague plans get vague results. Right? And I really like that. When I read it, I was like, oh, I like that because it's true, right? When I don't know what the hell I'm aiming at, when I don't have a clear idea of what I'm trying to do and accomplish and how I'm trying to go about accomplishing it, I'm going to get really vague, sketchy results because I'm probably going to take the easiest way around. I'm probably going to try to find the quickest route, and I'm not really thinking about what do I want to produce? Am I trying to produce quality or quantity? Am I trying to do something well or just get it done? And I think when you think that way, you really think about the planning, there is a lot involved. But it also gives us a clear idea of where we're going, and we can align ourselves to get to that goal. Because I think you've said it a million times, I think we both have, right? If we want something, we can get it. It is not impossible by any means. Yep. I mean, whatever it is, whether it's, making $1 million or whether it's, writing a book or whatever you want to do, you can absolutely achieve it. There is no reason why you can't.
Yeah, the probably the most shocking and the most empowering realization that you'll make in life is the only thing holding you back from the life of your dreams is your own self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's it. Like, that's it. There's not some other person. There's not this vague they out there that's holding you back. It's not the man. It's you and your beliefs.
Yeah, and it's funny, that vague person, all those theorized external enemies are really a way to make ourselves feel better when we're limiting ourselves. And it's amazing, but you can get anything done. It's really, the human, I always like Camus says that, the way we look at the world is inexhaustible. There's an infinite number of ways to interpret our lives, to interpret reality, and it really comes down to us. And I've always liked that idea because it is true, right? We don't have to stay in any confine. We don't have to stay with any rules. We can do whatever we want, but we have to be willing to do it. And those limitations that we set on ourselves are a fucking bitch. They suck.
Yeah.
And our imagination doesn't help when it comes to them, man. I know, I've done it to myself so many times, and I will get in these dark moods because all of a sudden I feel like everything, like I'll have a day where I feel like I can't do anything, everything's gonna fall apart, the world's against me, but then the next day I really look at it, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? It's not like that. That was just me having a sort of panic attack, basically.
Oh, okay, so I got two things I gotta share.
Okay.
So the first is that, the way that we look at things and the story we tell ourselves makes such a difference. Because the way that we tell the story, that it's personal, that it's permanent, and that it's pervasive, meaning it's something wrong with me, it's something that's going to be this way forever, and it's affecting every area of my life, that totally affects your outlook in terms of good or bad.
Yeah.
Because if you have all those things towards the good, then you're going to have an optimistic good life.
Well, they say, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. They say, right, it's like the negative feedback loop or the positive feedback loop. If I have a negative outlook, I will interpret every experience to reinforce that negativity. If I have a positive outlook, everything will be interpreted to reinforce that positivity.
Yeah, and so to go on what you're saying there, they've actually done very, very in-depth studies that the way you're feeling in this moment affects your outlook on your life by greater than 70%.
Oh my God.
So if you're feeling shitty right now, you have a greater than 70% chance that you're going to feel very pessimistic about your life. Whereas if you're feeling good right now, you have a greater than 70% chance that you're going to feel good about your life. So I started kind of trying to imprint in my brain that anytime I'm feeling pessimistic about my life, look at how I'm feeling now. And if I'm feeling bad now, I'll say, okay, let's forget about what my life is doing. Let's try and deal with this mood right now.
I like that too, because you know what? For patience, that's important. You have to address now in order to be patient and endure, right? Otherwise, your patience is shot.
Yeah, because enduring is always now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's getting through now, right? And you have to address it and you have to face it. But I think our big problem in this point too is we run away from it, right?
Well, I think the greatest example of endurance is now is, there's this thing that we can endure through stuff in the future. Like I remember before going to university, Danny and I were talking about taking out student loans, and we're like, oh yeah, we'll take out loans and we'll pay those off. That's not a big deal. We'll just do it in the future.
Yeah.
We'll be working, not a big deal.
Everybody says it's fine. There'll be no financial crises, 20 of them in 10 years, nothing big.
Now we're enduring through that. And it's a totally different beast when you're actually enduring through it now as to future preparation. Had we have way back then been like, well, what if it's 10 times worse than what we expect? Then we'd be like, we might have given it a second thought.
Yeah, right? I might have thought about it differently. Yeah. I mean, that's a difficult time too, because we were young. You have expectations placed on you from the outside, and it's funny. I think that's why too, I thought about this a lot recently. Like, as you get older, I feel like it's easier sometimes to develop patience because you also are living your own life. You get to a point, I don't know, call it maturity, call it what you want, right? Where that outside stuff stops mattering as much and you realize, dude, this is my life. I wish I had realized that way earlier, that this is my life, I should live it exactly how I want. But hey, it is what it is and we deal with it now, right? Mm-hmm. We deal with the present.
Yeah, agreed. The more you can realize that this is your life, you don't have to, when I finally learned that I don't have to please my parents anymore, I love them both dearly, but this is my life. I'm not living to please them.
Well, right, that's a good point, right? You can love somebody, you can want somebody to be a part of your life, but you don't have to act only for them. And I think that's a big problem we all have, right? Is understanding our relationships is difficult. Mm-hmm. What do you think? I think, so we've talked about the attitude, right? Having the right attitude to endure is important. I think positivity is essential. How can we become more positive then? Because patience, I think a lot of times when we think of patience, people think of one thing, being patient, dealing with something, getting through it. But I think they forget that there's a lot of other stuff you can do that can actually improve your patience simply by making things better, right? So if I can increase my positive outlook, I'm more willing, I have the energy to deal with the obstacles in my life. Yeah. When I'm negative, I know, and I know you've gone through this too, right? When you're having an existential crisis, when you're depressed, it is hard to do anything. And if you can develop a positive outlook and get rid of that negativity, everything, becomes easier to plan, to realize your goals, and to get through these things.
Yeah. All right, so we were just talking about this a little bit earlier, and again, this is in the Martin Seligman books that I'm reading, but he's done 40 years of research in psychology and psychiatry and everything like that. And so they've looked through all the studies of people using antidepressants and counseling, therapy, stuff like that. And they compared those studies with people just doing this one little 3-step process. All right, it's simple. It takes 5 minutes. And the people who did this one thing that takes 5 minutes, they had better, more long-lasting, positive results in their life than the people who took medications and went to therapy. And this one simple thing is just every day, ideally before you go to sleep, just write down 3 good things that happened to you in your life and why they happened to you. Like, for instance, I got to play with a puppy today who was super cute because I chose to do this with my life and become a veterinarian. Or, I got to see my sister's baby because the universe blessed her with a beautiful child.
Yeah, right. Or I got to spend time with a good friend because I made time to do that, right? And I realized that it's an improvement on my life. Or I had a really great hot chocolate. Yeah. Or, it can be literally anything.
Or I got a raise because I worked my butt off and I actually did it. And just taking this, it takes less than 5 minutes a day.
Actually, on that note too, there's one thing, basically a modification to that practice. If you want, you can also carry a notebook, a pocketbook with you, like a pocket-sized notebook with you, and jot them down as you go. I've tried that and I like that method a lot because I think either way, it forces you to be more conscious and self-aware of these good moments, right?
Yeah. Why don't you share what you were talking about with the guy who was journaling about the best thing?
Oh, yeah. So there was this guy, I think his name is Ross Gay. He wrote a book called, it's like the Book of Delights or Small Delights, something like that. But basically, he gave himself this challenge to every day find something delightful, a small delight, like like kittens or whatever, and write a short essay about it. And some of them are great, and they're simple things, like, seeing, like, the way the leaves are falling off the trees in fall and the colors, like, or, a good cup of coffee and a good conversation with a friend. They're nothing major, not these huge, successes. They're little everyday pleasures. And he found that doing this process, he became really a lot more positive. His outlook became more optimistic because basically he felt better. He forced himself to be more self-aware, but not just jot down what happened, but actually jot down an essay, right? Why it happened, like you were saying, which is important. You have to also not just say, I had a good hot chocolate, but what was it that was so joyful? What was it that was such a pleasure?
Yeah, I can see this. I actually may be taking on this activity because I can see this as actually being a really great way to kind of de-stress from the day. Not only write down a little essay about the best thing that happened, but also take some watercolors and paint it.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Because that uses a part of my brain that I never get to use.
Yeah.
The whole creative, artistic part of my brain.
And you know what I love about that too is that you're willing to take that on. It doesn't matter if you're good at painting. All that matters is that you're willing to try it.
Because I'm not showing it to anyone else.
No,
even if I do, what do I care if they think about me?
And the funny thing is you'll become better at it simply by doing it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way too because you're trying something new that you're not familiar with, but you're willing to try it, and that's important.
Yeah, I'm willing to fail because I know that through failure I'll get feedback, and if I use that feedback, I will succeed.
Exactly.
Because one of the best definitions of success is having $1 million in the bank.
Right? That's always it.
But that's not it. Unfortunately, that's kind of the general thought. You're a success when you have millions of TikTok followers and millions of dollars in the bank, but it's not. Most of those people are the most depressed people on the world.
Well, and if you really look at it, they are. And the problem is because our culture is very much, we've made everything valuable by money, and I think that was our biggest mistake.
Because it's easily measurable.
Yes, it is.
Like how am I supposed to measure my happiness quotient compared with you? Like you can't look at somebody else and know their happiness quotient.
No.
But you can see what car they drive, what watch they wear, what shoes they wear. You can see all those things.
Yeah, all those things are easily valuable. They're right there in your face. And I think that's why we do it. And I think the problem with it is that really, it simplifies and glosses over all the important things. Things that give your life meaning that don't have a dollar value.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I have, a stuffed animal from when I was born, right? And I never gotten rid of it. I like that thing. It gives my life value. I don't use it or anything, right? But I wouldn't get rid of it because
that's cool. I got a stuffed animal too.
Yeah, right? And something like that I know has no monetary value. It wouldn't be valuable to anyone else, but it is valuable to me, and I want it to be part of my life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that excerpt from, I don't know. I forget what it's from. Some bunny. The story of some bunny. Okay, well, anyways. But anyways.
We'll get there.
The meaning of success, or the definition of success that I love, is that it's the progressive realization of a worthwhile ideal, of a worthy ideal.
Oh, I like that.
And the parts of it that I like are, number one, it's a progressive realization. It's not the instantaneous realization. It's a progressive realization. So it's something that you have to work towards over time. And then also, it's a worthy ideal. And it's not a worthy ideal to your parents, and it's not a worthy ideal to society, and it's not a worthy ideal to your significant other or to your children. It's a worthy ideal to you. Because in finding what that thing is that's worthwhile for you to do with your life, and actually going after it and working towards it, you become a different person in doing that. And more worthwhile than the actual realization of that ideal is the person that you become in working towards that.
I like that too. And you know what? If you focus on what is fulfilling for you, what's worthwhile for you, you will also see, I think, other people recognize that. And they will see that. And they'll see the person you became. So it doesn't, in the end, I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't matter their expectations. It doesn't matter what they think at the outset. They will come to realize the value in it once they see the fulfillment you have in your life, right? I think that's crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're talking a lot about, we started out talking about patience.
We're supposed to be talking about patience.
Right?
What the heck?
We're talking a lot about positivity, a lot about planning, a lot about our attitude and our outlook. And I think what's crucial is all these things are part of patience. And because it's all a part of life. Life is this process, this activity, right?
Yeah. It's important that we talk about positivity and stuff like that because I read in these books I'm talking about all the time that
I don't shut the fuck up about.
Right? That actually optimism gives you patience.
It does, yeah.
Because if you have the outlook that things will be better, then you can endure through anything.
That is a great point, right? Having that positivity, having that optimism makes it easier to endure because you also expect things to be better on the other end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're negative, I mean, it's so commonsensical. I almost feel like we all need to be reminded of it all the time.
Well, because we're like you said earlier, we're both rational and emotional.
Yeah.
And when we're in these bad emotions, rationality goes out the window.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of the Stoics, right? Which is to understand that and to try and kind of always bring it back to reason so that we can stay in control. Because emotions are great. They're an important part of life. I think they can help us figure out a lot of important questions about our life, but they also can derail us. And we all know this, right? I mean, emotions are they're irrational, right? They can cause us to derail. So it's important to have a grip on that and to bring it back to reason and to look at the world from the right perspective.
Yeah. And so looking at it from the right perspective, here's another tip that I have for how to develop patience. So I think the first step of developing patience is recognizing when you're being impatient. Recognizing what those triggering situations are. And this is actually something I was talking about with my therapist, how to deal with some impatience at work. And they were saying, whenever you recognize impatience, just smile and laugh at it, and then do your best to deal with it with a smile. And that's like such a key, because now I'm recognizing it all the time. And these things previously that would have frustrated me, I kind of laugh to myself. I'm like, oh, here it goes again.
Yeah.
And then I smile and get through it. And then afterwards, I'm like, geez, that was a lot easier than I thought it would be.
Well, yeah, it's funny, it's like we talked about positivity too, and like the idea of a smile, I think is a great way to look at that, because it reminds you to laugh at yourself, right? It reminds you not to take yourself so seriously. And I can think of countless examples, especially because I love writing, but I get frustrated a lot writing. It's easy to. And a lot of times I just remind myself to be positive about it, that I like this, I enjoy it. And I take a break, take 5 minutes, come back to it, and my attitude's changed and I can get through it. It's not that hard, right? But it's like we make things infinitely difficult for ourselves or infinitely easy, I think, in a certain respect. Things will always be hard. It's life. There will always be challenges. There will always be obstacles, right? And I like your idea though, laughing at it, smiling about it, and kind of laughing at yourself, because this will happen again and again.
Here's like the most funny cosmic joke I just recently had. So one of the most defining moments in my life, not that it was a great defining moment, but in second grade I came in second place in the spelling bee.
Oh.
And that's always been like, I was that close to being first place. Like I hear it with first, second, and third place. Like the first place person's happy because they won. The third place person's happy because they made the podium. But the second place person is just torn up because they didn't make first.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it, yeah.
And so like that's how I felt about this whole thing my entire life. And the word that I lost on in second grade was flourish. so now, probably one of the most monumental books I've ever read in my life is by Martin Seligman, called Flourish.
That's funny.
I'm just like, what a cosmic joke
that it
could wrap around this entire way.
But I think this is what's important. We talk about planning, we talk about positivity, we talk about patience, all these things, right? A lot of this has to do with being more self-aware. Being more aware of ourselves, of what we're going through, being more readily or quicker at identifying what we're going through, and being able to endure through it, right? Being able to sort of address it and figure out how to overcome it. I mean, self-awareness is crucial, and I think one of the problems we struggle with, not only with our expectations being so off these days, is also sort of our distraction. We are constantly distracted from being aware of what we're doing, being alive, right? We watch TV, we're on our phones, we're constantly sort of pulled away from what's going on around us, and I think this is why jotting down little pleasures each day is such a great way to bring yourself back into the moment. To bring yourself back to yourself, essentially, right?
Yeah, because everything good really happens in the moment. All the pleasures happen in the moment. They happen now. And the only way you can get through impatience is by dealing with it now.
Yeah, right? By addressing it right now. And I think the important thing, that we've said this over and over again this episode, but anything you face, you can overcome. It is possible. We have so many examples in the world and in history of people overcoming ridiculous obstacles. And when you think of it that way, the ones that you face are probably not that great, right? I mean, people have overcome so many different things. I mean, look at Stephen Hawking. Overcame really, a very difficult illness and still produced such amazing work throughout his whole life, still taught, did all these things, and that could not have been easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't imagine the emotional, psychological stress that guy went through, like,
Right.
honestly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you find something, you know, that's worthwhile that you want to do. I think that's important.
Yeah. So let's see, we've touched on what is patience, how to recognize patience, how to endure through patience.
What are some things you would sort of then recommend, given everything we talked about, because we kind of touched on quite a
How
lot?
to prepare for impatience.
How to prepare? Oh, that's a good one. How do you prepare for impatience?
Yeah, because if you're not feeling impatient now, I can guarantee you're going to feel it.
Yeah, right? I mean, it happens all day, every day.
Yeah. There's a couple of ways that I would see preparing for it. So one would be looking back through your life at times when you have been patient. Like maybe times when you've just waited in line and instead of being angry about it, you just sat there, you closed your eyes for a minute and just took some real conscious breaths. Or maybe sometime you were stuck in traffic and instead of being angry about it, you just listened to an audiobook and just relaxed and said, hey, I'll get there when I get there.
I like that example, right? Because, you know, traffic's one that gets a lot of people. I see people smash their steering wheel, honking, you know, yelling out the car. And I mean, hey, if you got to get that anger out, I guess go ahead. But, you know, it's funny because, like, I used to commute a ton, man. Every day I was driving like an hour both ways to work. And I would hit traffic that, you know, I would have to leave 3 hours early because sometimes it would take 2.5 hours to get there. And I got to a point where I would get frustrated, so frustrated. And then I just was like, why am I wasting my energy? Because I'd get to work, I'd be so upset. So I just started listening to audiobooks and podcasts all the time. And I actually started to get to a point where I was like, yes, I'm in traffic. I can finish this book or I can finish this thing, you know? And it's funny because I started to learn a lot of different things. I was listening to a lot of different books. It was fantastic. And I think it's part of patience is learning how to take advantage of the time. Learning how to take advantage of these things that would otherwise frustrate you, shifting your perspective so that you see it differently, right? Because we talk about positivity, we talk about small pleasures, we talk about taking action, planning. Sometimes the planning part of it is just planning the right perspective, planning the right outlook, so that when you're sort of faced with these moments like waiting in line, you are ready for it, right? And you're ready to take advantage of it. Don't waste your time, use it.
Yeah,
Do something.
I love how you say looking at it differently. Because you'll see two people standing in line. One person will just be, you know, totally peaceful. The other person will be seething with rage. But it's the same line.
Yeah.
You know, and just learning to look at it differently. Like, oh, here's a great way to learn to look at these difficulties in life when you're experiencing impatience. Okay, looking at it as this is the attaining of my goal. This is getting me to what I want, because really it is.
Yeah.
If you keep a goal in mind, you're going to hit it. So dealing with these difficulties, enduring through these impatient times is actually getting you towards your goal.
It is, right? And when we talk about, you know, it's funny, we were talking about the lines and stuff. So often I've seen people too who get frustrated in line and stuff. They then take it out on someone else. They take it out on a poor employee at like the DMV or at like a retail store or something. And when you really look at that person from the outside, you know, think to yourself, do I really want to be that person? Do I really want to be taking out my frustration on someone else? And that's a great example of when social life can get you to where you want to be, right? Because if you want to be a good person, if you want to develop that patience, that virtue, part of it is learning to endure when you need to so that you don't let your emotions get the best of you. You don't take it out on others or yourself, right? Because I think our limitations are born from taking our emotions out on ourselves. Very much so, right? Mm-hmm. Our fear, our regrets, our guilt, all of that we sort of channel into ourselves rather than dealing with them appropriately. Mm-hmm. And it causes these problems.
Yeah. One last thing that I'd like to say, and then you can say whatever you'd like to say.
Okay, thank you.
As you know, when I was living down in Florida for a while, and I remember I was going through a difficult time in my life, and I was talking with one of my friends down there, Steven, and I was telling him about it, and he told me this story about his life and somebody who said something really meaningful to him. And he was going through a really difficult time in his life. And somebody said to him, what makes you think that you don't have to suffer through this? I mean, everybody else is suffering through stuff. What makes you think that you're so special you don't have to suffer through it?
That should just be easy peasy.
Yeah, and that just struck me because I was like, wow, I'm really thinking that I don't have to suffer. Everybody else suffers. I mean, the Buddha said everybody suffers.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking I'm so special that I don't have to suffer at all. And that was just kind of eye-opening for me. So that's my final thought.
I like that. That's a great final thought, right? That, we all do suffer, recognizing that. And, I think that's also a good point too, because when we recognize that, it also can make us more comfortable, because we realize, hey, it's not just me, right? I think my final thought, I'll end with something kind of, don't forget the tortoise and the hare, right? I think it's a great, easy, we all know the story, right?
The hare wins every time, right?
Every time, right? Now. So the hare rushes, right? The hare's rushing through, trying to do all these ridiculous things, and the tortoise just persists. And I think part of patience is persistence. It's persevering through it, regardless of what happens, right? I mean, that's really what patience is. We talk about endurance, we talk about perseverance. It's about getting through. And I think if you keep that in mind, sometimes you have to go slowly, sometimes you have to shift your perspective, but it is doable and it will be accomplished in time when you think that way. I think that's the best way to think about patience.
Yeah, persistently, patiently, you are bound to succeed.
Exactly.
And it's all turtles all the way down.
Always turtles.
Well, Danny, that's been a lot of fun today.
Absolutely.
I hope all you guys enjoyed this, listening to it. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification bell if you can.
Anything else that will help, yeah, please.
Yeah, we really appreciate you guys spending this time with us every week. So we will see you back next week, but in the middle of the week, we'll have a quick fix.
A quick fix, yeah, our new series with this.
New series, short little handy, helpful, quick tips to get you on your way during the week. So,
awesome, yeah.
I'll catch you later, Danny.
All right, take care, buddy.
Bye.
Bye.